Today's video looks at the case of Christine Johnson, a case that seemed straightforward at first until investigators uncovered a detail that shifted everything. What actually happened to Christine? Let's walk through what we know. Take a close look at the woman in the black hat seen in this surveillance footage from Los Angeles on February 15, 2003. That woman is 21-year-old Christine Johnson. At first glance, it looks like nothing more than a normal trip to the mall. But just a few hours later, Christine would be reported missing. Even the small purchase she made that day would later become part of the investigation. Police went through Christine's phone records and found that shortly after 5 p.m., she placed a call to a helpline from Laurel Canyon, high in the Hollywood Hills. One witness later told police she saw a woman who looked like Christine stop to ask for directions to a house further up the hill. After that, the trail goes quiet. No confirmed sightings, no clear answers. 5 days later, on February 20th, police received a call that would bring Christine's case into the public eye. A woman reported an encounter she'd had weeks earlier at the same mall Christine visited. She said a man approached her, claiming he was working on the next James Bond film, and invited her to audition. At the time, she didn't think much of it. Now it felt different. As detectives compared her story with others, a disturbing pattern began to form. They realized they might be dealing with someone who had been targeting women in Hollywood for years, using the same promises, the same approach. To understand why Christine was vulnerable to someone like that, it helps to look at where she was in her life. In 2001, Christine Johnson was 20 years old and had just moved from the small town of Saugatuck to Southern California. Like so many others, she came to Los Angeles hoping to break into the film industry while going to school. But work was hard to find. At times, she even talked about going back home. Still, she stayed. She kept trying. Christine landed a job as a production assistant on a movie, but once that project ended, steady work didn't follow. She later took a job with a cell phone company just to pay the bills. Even then, she didn't give up on her goal of working in Hollywood. On Saturday, February 15, 2003, Christine spoke with her mom, Terry, on the phone. Christine mentioned she planned to go to the mall that day. Terry suggested she treat herself to a late Valentine's Day gift. They said goodbye, and Christine headed out. 2 days later, on February 17th, Terry tried calling her daughter again. Terry spoke to Christine every day, but this time, there was no answer. After more than 48 hours of silence, she knew something wasn't right. Terry contacted Christine's workplace and learned her daughter hadn't shown up that morning. No one there had heard from her. Her cell phone went straight to voicemail. That's when concern turned into fear, and the search for Christine Johnson truly began. Christine is known for always being on time. So when no one can reach her, her family immediately fears something is wrong. They report her missing to the police, but at that point, there are no real clues about where she might be. Her family doesn't wait. They get on a plane and head straight to Los Angeles. Once they arrive, investigators walk them through what's been done so far and set up a tip line. As the days pass, more people hear about Christine's disappearance, and the search starts to draw wider attention. Police contact Christine's credit card company and learn she made several purchases at the Westfield Century City Mall on February 15th. Security footage confirms she was there around 1 p.m. that afternoon. The images show Christine walking through the mall, but nothing in the video explains what happened next. Investigators also speak with Christine's roommate. She remembers Christine coming home that day, excited, showing off a new outfit she'd just bought at the mall. Not long after, Christine left again, this time for what she described as an important movie audition. It was the first clear sense of where Christine might have been headed, but her roommate couldn't remember where the audition was supposed to take place. Police then review Christine's phone records. They discover that just after 5 p.m. on February 15th, Christine placed a call to a helpline from Laurel Canyon in the Hollywood Hills. Around that same time, a witness reported seeing a woman who looked like Christine driving a white Miata. The woman had stopped to ask for directions to a house farther up the hill. After that, she was gone. As Christine's parents learn more about her final movements, a new fear sets in, that someone she knew may have been involved. They push for answers, doing everything they can to help bring their daughter home. Police question Christine's ex-boyfriend, who admits their relationship included domestic abuse. However, he denies having anything to do with her disappearance and says he wasn't even in town when Christine went missing. Investigators confirm his alibi through multiple witnesses, and that lead goes nowhere. Then, on February 20th, 2003, 5 days after Christine disappeared, police receive a call that changes the direction of the case. A woman named Susan Murphy reaches out after reading about Christine in the newspaper. The article mentioned a movie audition, and that detail immediately caught Susan's attention. She tells police that just weeks earlier, a man had approached her and invited her to audition as well. As Susan describes the encounter, Detective Virginia Obenchain realizes this is the first solid lead they've had. Even though the article didn't mention what Christine bought at the mall, Susan is already uneasy. She can't shake the feeling that the man she met might somehow be connected to Christine's disappearance. After Susan described the man in detail, detectives asked her to walk through everything she could remember. Together, they put together a composite sketch. That image was soon shared on television stations across the country in the hope that someone would recognize him. Then on February 24th, 9 days after Christine disappeared, her car turned up in an unexpected place. It was sitting in a hotel's valet parking lot. Police notified Christine's parents right away. When they arrived, they were terrified of what they might find. Inside the car, there was only one item: Christine's cell phone. The valet told officers that a man had dropped the car off on February 16th, just 1 day after Christine was last seen. It was another unsettling detail, but still, no sign of Christine herself. By February 27th, 12 days after she vanished, there were still no answers. Even so, her family refused to stop searching. Vigils were held in Christine's honor, one in Los Angeles, another back home in Michigan. As the story spread and Susan Murphy's composite sketch continued to circulate, more women began reaching out to police. Each of them hoped their experience might help explain what happened to Christine. One of those women was Liz Bazzini. Liz told investigators about an encounter she'd had years earlier, in 1991, more than a decade before Christine disappeared. She said she met a man at a restaurant who talked about a job opportunity on an upcoming James Bond movie. As they sat at the bar, something felt off to her almost immediately. When Liz glanced down at her drink, she noticed white powder floating on the surface. She quietly excused herself and went to the bathroom, where she called the restaurant manager. Then she came up with a plan. She went back to the bar and kept talking, trying to stall the man until police could arrive. At one point, she asked him directly about the powder. He brushed it off, saying it was just sugar. Liz then suggested they switch drinks and encouraged him to try hers instead. Before the police could get there, the man suddenly got up and left. Years later, when Liz learned about Christine Johnson's disappearance, she couldn't shake the feeling that it was the same man. Another woman, Christine Klugian, shared a similar story with investigators. She said that back in 1989, she met a man who introduced himself as John. After weeks of talking, he asked her out on a date. He told her they'd be attending a party in a hotel room and claimed he worked for Columbia Records. After dinner, they got into a car and headed back to the hotel. But when Christine Klugian stepped off the elevator, something immediately felt wrong. The hallway was empty. There was no noise, no voices, no sign of a party anywhere nearby. That's when fear really set in. The man led her to a hotel room, and the moment she stepped inside, Christine understood what was happening. There was no party, no gathering. This was never what he'd promised. He pulled ropes out from behind the bed and tied her up. Somehow, Christine managed to break free. She ran from the room and found help before he could stop her. The man, Victor Paleologos, was caught trying to flee. He later accepted a plea deal and was sentenced to 3 years of probation. Even 2 weeks after Christine Johnson disappeared, police were still searching urgently for her. When Susan Murphy's composite sketch aired, a parole officer recognized the face. He believed it looked like Victor Paleologos and contacted authorities. Detectives soon obtained a warrant to search his home. On his computer, they found images of men wearing the same type of clothing Christine had bought the day she went missing. Susan had also told police that Paleologos suggested she wear a similar outfit to her audition. By now, a pattern was becoming harder to ignore. When investigators went looking for Paleologos, they learned he was already in jail on unrelated charges. He'd been arrested for trying to steal a car. Detectives questioned him about Christine, but he refused to give them anything. He claimed he had an alibi for the day she disappeared, saying he'd met a friend for a meal. That friend confirmed they were together. Still, investigators weren't convinced. Palaiologos didn't arrive at IHOP until around 5:30 p.m. on February 15th, hours after Christine was last seen. That left a significant gap of time, enough for something terrible to have happened. 16 days after Christine vanished, police asked Susan Murphy to view a lineup. She didn't hesitate. She identified Victor Palaiologos as the man who had approached her. There was still hope that Christine might be found alive. But that hope was about to change. As Detective Virginia Obenchain was walking Susan out of the police station, she received a phone call. A group of people out for a walk had discovered a body in a gorge near the Hollywood Hills. When officers arrived at the scene, they found the body of a young woman. After weeks of searching, the truth became impossible to avoid. Everyone's worst fears had been confirmed. Christine was dead. Police had to deliver the news no family ever wants to hear. Her parents were devastated. The autopsy showed that Christine died from strangulation. Investigators ruled her death a homicide. Now the focus shifted to one urgent question: who did this, and how could they prove it? Even with Christine's body recovered, police still didn't have clear evidence tying anyone directly to her murder. Victor Palaiologos, already connected to multiple incidents and identified by witnesses, quickly became the main suspect. But without DNA evidence, prosecutors had to build their case piece by piece, relying on witness accounts and patterns of behavior. The trial began on July 13, 2006. Several women who had crossed paths with Palaiologos over the years took the stand, sharing their experiences and laying out a history of similar behavior. Their stories helped show that Christine's case wasn't an isolated event. One of those women was Kathy DeBuono. Kathy testified about an encounter that happened in 1999, 4 years before Christine disappeared. She said a man approached her at the same mall. He introduced himself as Brian and claimed he worked for Disney. He told her she'd be perfect for a James Bond film he said he was producing. Something didn't sit right. Disney doesn't make James Bond movies. Before leaving, Kathy asked for his business card. Still uneasy, she called her father, who was a New York police officer. He told her not to meet the man again. At that point, no crime had been committed, so there was nothing police could do. Kathy believed the man could be dangerous, but she didn't want to ignore the situation. Hoping to stop him from approaching other women, she agreed to meet him again, but brought a stuntman friend with her for safety. The man never showed up. Years later, Kathy saw Victor Palaiologos' photo on television in connection with Christine's murder. She recognized him immediately. This time, she knew she could finally come forward. Another woman, Heather Mayer, also testified. She described an incident from 1998 in which Palaiologos tried to assault her. He was caught and later expressed remorse. Victor Palaiologos was released on parole on January 20, 2003, less than a month before Christine vanished. He had served 3 years and 5 months in prison. Just 4 days after his release, he approached Susan Murphy. Susan later took the stand as well, facing Palaiologos again in court. She testified not just for herself, but to support Christine's family and help bring some sense of closure after years of unanswered questions. On January 24, 2003, Susan was at the Century City Mall, the same place Christine had been just hours before she disappeared. While she was there, a man approached her and introduced himself as Victor Thomas. He said he was casting for an audition the following day. He sounded confident and seemed to know the industry, but something about the way he spoke made Susan uneasy. After she left, Susan decided to check his story. She called the Screen Actors Guild and asked if a new James Bond film was in production. They told her there wasn't. Susan still couldn't be sure what the man's intentions were, but she felt strongly that he needed to be stopped before someone got hurt. So she agreed to meet him again. But this time, she came prepared. She brought mace and a camera, and her boyfriend Tony waited nearby in the car, keeping watch. As they talked, the man suggested they grab a drink across the street before heading to the audition. The building he pointed to looked abandoned. That raised another red flag. Susan subtly gestured toward Tony's car, making it clear she wasn't alone. The moment he realized that, everything changed. His attitude shifted, and he took off. Susan tried to stop him, worried about who he might go after next. She and Tony jumped into their car and followed him, eventually spotting him hiding among some nearby trees. Susan wasn't physically hurt, but she was shaken. She knew she'd crossed paths with someone dangerous, even if she didn't yet know how far he was willing to go. Because no crime had technically been committed, police couldn't take action. Less than a month later, Christine Johnson disappeared. Today, Susan's experience is a key part of understanding Victor Paleologos' pattern of behavior. In total, 7 women came forward and testified against him, each one facing the same man who had managed to avoid accountability for years. His approach was always similar. He targeted women with hopes of working in Hollywood. He asked them to buy specific outfits. He promised auditions that could change their lives. On their own, each story might seem incomplete, but together, they tell a clear and troubling story. Even so, without DNA evidence, prosecutors had to weigh whether witness testimony alone would be enough to convict him. As the evidence continued to build, Victor Paleologos ultimately accepted a plea deal, choosing that over the possibility of facing the death penalty. In a surprising move, he later sent the court an 11-page letter asking to take back his guilty plea. It didn't change the outcome. On September 15, 2006, he was sentenced to 25 years to life for the murder of Christine Johnson. For the women who testified, the case hit close to home. As they listened, they recognized pieces of their own experiences in what had happened to Christine. And together, they found the courage to speak openly about what they'd been through. Their testimony helped stop a man who had been targeting young women in Hollywood for more than a decade. None of them had ever met Christine. Still, they chose to step forward in her name. By doing so, they helped give her family answers they had waited years for, and a sense of peace they never thought they'd have. Today, these women continue to honor Christine's memory. They speak up for survivors of assault and encourage others to come forward. Their message is simple and hard-won. Telling the truth matters, and every voice has the power to move justice forward. Thank you for watching Murder Ledger. We explore real cases, unanswered questions, and the details that refuse to fade. If these stories matter to you, consider subscribing and sharing your thoughts in the comments.